Okay. Hi everybody. Just setting up to begin. As you see, just a really quick crash course on paper 3. It's not as complicated as paper 2 by a long shot, so I don't think that much explanation is necessary, and I do have some samples going though. So what I want to do mostly is just answer questions. All right. So I've seen this one before, but yeah. Okay, so you're asking about the main language techniques, right? So we are familiar with the, let's look at this paper from January 2023, which I haven't actually worked, and I'm going to link these papers soon so people can get them. But we know they're coming down after you read the 3 texts, which is mostly what this paper is about. You assessing these 3 texts. Hi, good night. Right, you are going to be asked these 3 questions about it, right? So the first question, part A, has to do with the idea of one-on-one classes. I might start doing that this year, but you can email me, CSEC Panda at gmail.com, and I'll probably be able to get back to you and we can look into that a little bit more. I'm only really planning to get started maybe around 8, just when a couple more people join. I could have announced this before, but I wasn't even sure I was going to do it, so that's cool. Yeah, so right now I'm answering this question about the main language techniques, and we're just doing a little warm-up on the paper itself and how that works, right? So after you read the 3 pieces that they give, you are gonna go to question 1A, where they're asking about the main idea or issue presented in each of the 3 texts. So, as always, I recommend doing, was my highlighter, right? Active reading, so you can figure out exactly what they want you to do, each of the 3. So, text 1, text 2, text 3, you get the main idea in here. I'll show you some examples of how I did that. The second part wants you to choose just one of the 3 texts and talk about the appropriateness for communicating the idea or issue. Right? So how do you think that the main idea that you just kind of singled out above goes over better because it was done that way as opposed to anything else? Right? Cool, the mic is low, thanks for telling me. Let me see. Oh, it is low. What? How about... Alright, how about that? Let me know if it's better. Around now, it had reset itself to 100%, and normally I have it, up to 300 or so. Right, so, thank you. And let me know if there are any other little issues that I can fix like that so it comes out better. Alright, so going back a little bit, outlining the main idea in each of the three, that's what you're going for. What is the approach needed when trying to understand what we're reading? I always recommend underlining, simply put, which is active reading. So you're going to be coming through this with your pencil. Wow. All right. Right. So you're going to be coming through this with your pencil, underlining stuff as you go through reading this so that the ideas are able to jump out better, right? Also, 7:56, that's close enough. Oh yeah, I was supposed to appoint a mod, but like, also you could just behave. That'd be good, because we're all trying to just learn here, right? Alright, so you have 2 hours to do this, which is way less pressure than paper 2. That's the first thing I want everybody to know, because you're out here accustomed to the stress of paper 2 and how long, you have to fit into a very narrow amount of time that you actually have to do the thing. And at that point, it can become a little bit of pressure. But with 2 hours to work on these 3 questions, it is a lot simpler in the end for you to read the text slowly. So that's the first thing, right? Then I recommend that you actually go through and you highlight, right? And as you go through, even when you come back and you see, all right, starting with the title, Negative Impacts of Education, then Modern Education System is churning out self-centered individuals. Success is measured in terms of what I achieved. So as you go through that, you're going to have an easier time understanding what they mean, right? I think all through these exams, active reading and underlining stuff, I've never known anything better for understanding what's going on here. I'm from Trinidad. Yeah. All right, so you're going to go through this and you're going to do that. This particular case, they had an online article, so there was more to look at, and you can do the underlining thing, and that works, right? The second thing was just a picture, straight out, and so that's it. You're out here, and you need to interpret this somehow. I had run through, I didn't actually do it, but I ran through this paper with Mr. Webb. And maybe some of you guys have seen that video before. But this, I don't know what you're supposed to make of this. I mean, you take the title, traditional versus modern education, and then you just have to make something of this, right? So that's what you're going to be doing. Yeah? And so the third text here is an excerpt from a calypso. Songs are a lot easier to interpret, especially if you did English B, because it's just poetry, and you're able to see some techniques here a lot easier, like repetition, which clearly is happening a lot here. And then you can see rhyme, so that makes it easier to know. I'm a lady, and I'm from Trinidad, so that's what's up there, right? So that's how the text is all the time. Over the time, and we're going to run through a couple more papers, we are going to be able to see more of the things that they have brought, right? So over here, we understand that question 1 out of 3 starts with asking about the main idea, right? So Main idea, 1, 2, 3, you get that, 1 each. In section B of question 1, you're out here. Right. So you're out here and you're looking at the appropriateness of the text for communicating the idea or the issue. So at that point, you want to say that the song was good for communicating this issue because reason. I did another one of these, so we'll look at in a little while, where you can see why. Question C. For any 2, so you want to make sure you do 2, of the texts that you got, you will be choosing a language technique used in each, and you'll be explaining its effectiveness. So over the years, they have gotten better at just giving you the lines, so you can, it's not as challenging to format your answer anymore because they have the fields for everything. So just show them which text you're talking about, what technique was used, and then you talk about the effectiveness. And then I have a paper that I actually solved so that, yeah, you can see that. You're just looking at this paper. These aren't as easy to find, these paper 3s, for some reason. I think it's because when people actually get into it, they think of it as kind of a non-issue, or it's not as complicated to do, so I think people don't make as much of sharing them and stuff. Right, so at the beginning, somebody had asked, what is these language techniques? If you did English B, this will be easier for you because, I mean, you're looking for metaphor, rhyme, rhythm, imagery, repetition, dialogue, these kinds of things. Right, so that's going to be coming back out here. Because remember, this paper is shared between English A and English B, so it's the kind of thing where the skills are also shared between them, right? So, I mean, there's some things like a song where rhyme, as I say, is really easy to pick up if they have that. But if you have a picture, you could just default to imagery because, I mean, it's an image and that's almost all it can serve. The picture can't rhyme or something, so there's that. One of these years, maybe it was this year, January 2023, yeah, there was a picture and people put imagery and they pass, so imagery is what I would say. If they just have a picture, you could do that. But if you, my advice, if you choose a device that you're not so sure about, make sure you really back up the second part of the question where they ask about the effectiveness by really explain what you mean by that, right? Don't just say imagery and then drop it there, because at that point, even the person who's marking your thing might not be able to make much of that, and they won't be able to give you too many marks here, right? So you don't want to do that. All right, and so, well, yeah, 3 marks still, but out of these 6. And so the second question sometimes is confusing, but it doesn't have to be. It begins to talk about if you're making a presentation. Very important to underline here because this question trips people up, right? So it's important to consider the composition of an audience. Then you need to explain 3 other factors besides the composition of the audience that the speaker has to consider if they're making a speech, essentially, right? So they end up with factor 1, reason 1. Again, they have simplified this question so that your answer can be more straightforward. In years before, it was a little more challenging to figure out how to do that, but no, not anymore. We're going to go through an actual field example of this in a while, but I just want to cover this in case people hadn't really seen one of these before or what have you. Okay, so the second part of question B, now they are saying that you've been asked to make a speech on the main idea or issue highlighted in the three texts that you saw above. So now give them 3 points that you would discuss in the oral presentation. It doesn't have to be one each necessarily, but you notice that across the 3 pieces, the theme still holds. So this one has to do with maybe the effects of education. So you would be putting 3 points here that are talking about the effects of education or whatever you deem the common theme of the 3 pieces to be, right? Then you come to needing to think of a group of persons. So you're thinking of a group who might be interested in this speech on the effects of education, right? Because you're talking about the issues that you outlined just above. So now we need 3 characteristics of the group and 3 techniques you would use to keep them interested. This can be very broad. I always like to think of things like age, gender, religion, financial background, education level as characteristics of the group. And then techniques you would use is absolutely anything you could use in a presentation, right? So whether it was something like statistics, or slides, or experiments that are live, or role play, or any other technique that can engage an audience that you could do while making an oral presentation, that would be fair game for this answer. And I've seen people interpret this in a number of different ways just because of how their mind works, and they've all passed. So because this paper 3 has more to do with assessing the reasoning power of the candidate than anything else, you have more room to include your opinion or your style of thinking than anywhere else on this exam, right? So again, they've simplified 1, 2, 3, where you're putting the techniques for the group. Now, because you have to technically put 6 answers and you're getting 6 marks, they're not really expecting you to go in too heavy in terms of how you respond to this. I would put more than just one word. So don't just say statistics here or slides. Go in a little bit more because you have a lot of time to do that, right? And then the third question requires creativity for 15 marks. These might be the easiest marks to get on the paper, just because you have the most room to decide what you want to do. So you're going to create an original response, right, using one of the ideas outlined in the beginning. So you can do literally anything you want. You could do drama, poetry, prose, any other suitable form. People have done essays for this. Somebody actually went in for a play, which I'm not good at writing those, but they did. Somebody did something, I can't remember what it was, but it was real different, and that worked as well. I wish I could remember what that person did, but it wasn't anything that you were expecting. It wasn't as much as drawing a picture, but it was different, and that worked as well. So, yeah. But you need to write something original here, and you have plenty of space to do that. The only thing you need to bear in mind now is that you are talking about one of the issues listed at the top, which is, again, going to be dealing with the theme. So when you are outlining the main idea here, you want to make sure that you get out a good, clear idea so that, well, 1, it makes it easier for you when you're writing in the end, and 2, the marker can tell what you probably were going for. All right, so this has been the most recent one of these papers available, being January 2023. Well, that I can find. Obviously, 2 more came out since then, but that allows you to see the current format. So you can lean more heavily on that than anything else in terms of format, because that's what you've got. That's what they're doing now. So now we're looking at this other paper that is January 2021, which is a little bit before. Oh, I'd like the other highlighter battle. Okay, right, so same 2 hours to do this. This is a paper that I had done in real life. This one was about the environment. So the text 1 here was an article from a newspaper, which is maybe one of the easiest things to find the main point of, just because they actually mean for you to understand it, and it works really well with underlining things, etc. What's challenging about this is to find a device that was used. In the end, I went for reported speech, aka dialogue, because there were instances of that in here. And what I've noticed with this is that it's so forgiving that you can identify anything that you saw in there as long as you can back up the explanation of it later on. That's what mostly matters, right? Alright, so the second text was a song. I think we've all heard this song at some point. Right, what a wonderful world. So even when you're scanning it here, you can see alliteration is happening here. You can see that rhyme is here. Whoops. Yeah, rhyme, like sky, by, those rhyme. You can see repetition in I see and then I see again. And there are other things going on here. There's imagery because he's doing a lot of seeing and hearing, so this one is definitely something worth commenting on later on because it's just so easy to take apart. And then the third text was a speech, which, once again, you could have said that this person was using a lot of, like they're painting a picture of this dramatic amount of climate change going on. So imagery again is a valid thing to use here, right? Because he's talking about all these different kinds of birds that are doing 2 weeks early, 3 weeks early, and being where they're not supposed to be. So when you go through this and you actually highlight, you would notice that yes, this is about climate change. It's pretty easy to see that this is an Earth Day speech, so it's not hard to take that apart. And then when you go through and you highlight this, you will be able to pull out what you think is the most important idea, right? And I say again, there's not as much chance to do this wrong because, they can't really tell you that your opinion is wrong unless you do something really far out. Okay, so my responses to this were the main idea in the first text was that ordinary people can work together successfully to rehabilitate the delicate marine environment which has suffered damage due to climate change. Right? So something as simple as that works. That's for 2 marks, so you might want to elaborate a bit more, which you can because you have the time, but that works, right? Then everywhere one looks in the natural world shouldn't be, can I fix it? Whoa. Okay. Alright, we're gonna leave it, but it should be everywhere one looks in the natural world, majestic beauty can be found, right? So that's pretty good. Text 3, the fight against the real and damaging effects of climate change belongs to each of us. By choosing to raise our voices and working together, we can tackle the scourge of climate change. Right, so you don't want to abandon totally the idea of using vocabulary and so on, just because it's worth it to do that. If you can, I would. Right, so now you're going to choose one. Remember to highlight this so you don't do either too much or too little. Choose one of the 3 texts on pages 4 to 7 and assess the appropriateness of the text for the purpose of communicating the ideas. So whatever you say here is going to be talking about appropriateness of that style for communicating the idea or issue. Right, so I said the song was an appropriate choice because the medium allows the weighty message of the beauty of nature to reach and captivate a broad audience who might otherwise not have taken notice. Right? But you could also have said something like, the reverence of the singer for nature can be heard in his voice, enticing others to share his wonderment and reassess the natural world around them, which they may have been taking for granted. Now, the second answer is better in a way because what they're zooming in on here is the appropriateness of the medium. So why is a song about nature being beautiful better than a speech about nature being beautiful? Not like better than, but what does it have going for it that something else might not? So in this case, the fact that you can hear the emotion, and honestly, if you listen to What a Wonderful World, you immediately feel the emotion of the thing and you feel that wonderment. So if you're choosing a song, the idea that something can be heard or emotion can be heard is a dead giveaway type of answer, right? Okay, so for any two of the texts, now you choose one language technique used in each and explain its effectiveness. So remember, you're talking about two texts here, and again, they've simplified this by just writing all these lines out for you. Right? You don't have a creative mind at all. I have a creative mind under pressure, but I don't think I would say I have such a creative mind. But again, there's a lot of time to do this. I don't know anybody who didn't finish this with at least 20 minutes to spare, so you have time. All right, so title of text, What a Wonderful World. The technique used is rhythm that I chose, but again, you had rhyme, you had repetition, you had options with that, right? So the effectiveness now, rhythm is used in the song to convey the moving message of the beauty of nature. It is effective because the melody will tend to stick in the mind of the listener, causing them to more repeatedly hear and absorb the meaning held within. Okay, so what you're really going for here is showing the examiner that if you were to assess a piece of writing in the real world, you would then be able to actually understand why this technique was used or what it could be for, right? So that's why you're using this technique. The second, goodbye, you will not be missed. I'm going to give you a timeout till tomorrow. Right. So basically for the second thing, you're just going to repeat the same thing, right? You just do it again. In this case, they are giving you an article and you're out here trying to find a technique that was used in this, right? So in this case, the title of the text was Lobsters and Reef Revival. That was from a newspaper article. What is the technique you're going to use there, right? So the technique that I chose was reported speech. I might have put reported speech / dialogue just so that they understand. When I'm really like out of ideas for something and I have dialogue available, I always choose dialogue. So I said, and again, no answer is so bad as long as you can back up the effectiveness because again, it's about your opinion. I chose to say, by using direct quotations from a relevant party who's at the heart of the restoration efforts, the writer creates a sense of credibility and humanizes the positive effects of the restoration project, right? And really and truly, that is what happened here, because I don't think that they could have just reported this completely dry, that the coastline was almost destroyed, and then they started fighting back, and blah, blah, blah. But by putting in this quote from one of the women who's actually working out of these 250 members to restore, you start feeling like this is just more hopeful, right? Because the fish have started coming back since the restoration activities began. And down here again, They say the nursery ought to be a suitable area free of sedimentation, strong currents, and boat traffic where the water is mostly free-flowing. You could have said that that is almost like relying on expert advice. There were places you could have gone with that, right? So you're just identifying a technique and then you expound on what you think was the effectiveness, right? Okay, so yeah, these marks are gonna affect your expression profile. So if you did kind of a sloppy job on paper 2, then you would want to pick these up. And this is 45 marks that are almost free, right? Considering how much time you have to do it, so go for it. Right, so in making a presentation, it's important to consider the composition of the audience. It's almost like they say this exact thing every time. So you could almost ignore this piece, and then you cut straight to explain 3 other factors besides the audience that a speaker must consider when making an oral presentation. So you have a lot of options here, right? The speaker must consider the usage of technical vocabulary. You don't want to be using jargon that the audience can't keep up with. Consider their tone of voice, their speed of speech, their volume, etc. Right? So each of those things would have gone on a different line here. But rather than just say what they should consider and then drop it right there, putting a little more of a reason, like since the audience must be able to hear, that is kind of obvious, but it at the same time is a great way to not just drop your answer right there and risk not getting all the marks, right? And for 6 marks, you almost can say it's like a mark per sentence. So writing one sentence that says what they should consider and one sentence that says why is a great way to have 2 sentences and fill this in a bit more, right? A miracle for dissecting passages. The best I could recommend is the underlining. That tends to have miraculous results. And again, this is more about your opinion than anything, so you may not be in as much trouble as to say, like, a summary is a little more technical. All right, so next I will ask you if you had to make an oral presentation on the main idea of this paper in the 3 texts, then what would you talk about? Right, so list 3 points that you would discuss in that oral presentation. So I said I could talk about the fact that we all have a part to play in stopping climate change. Our efforts to restore the balance of nature matter, and they can actually make a meaningful difference. And if climate change continues unabated, we will all suffer the consequences. My spelling is real off in this because I typed it up pretty fast just before I started this, but yeah. If climate change continues unabated, we will all suffer the consequences of living in a damaged world, right? So that question, 2B, is about what would you talk about if somebody made you make a speech about the issues that we are looking at on this paper. In this case, it is the effects of climate change, right? Then they ask you, they ask you to think of a group of people who might come listen to that speech. Now they want to know what are 3 characteristics of the group that you would be making this speech to, and what are 3 things you would do to keep them interested in the speech you're making. So once again, over the years, this has gotten easier and easier where they write it out for you. So you just put characteristics of the group. High school students, expound as much as you have the time to do. They might be intelligent and teachable in terms of what kind of people they are, and they might be motivated to take action. In other moments, I have given different characteristics like, again, age, gender, financial background, religious persuasion type of thing, but it depends heavily on 1, what you can think of when you're actually in the exam room, and 2, what kind of fits with the theme, right? So protecting the environment and getting all passionate about climate change, That sounds like a young people thing, and it sounds like a smart young people thing, and motivated to take action is what I have here. So now that you can picture the audience better, the techniques you would use, again, you have a lot of options. So you can display statistics, pertinent statistics. If you can't think of anything else, this will always be there for you, statistics, right? Showing before and after posts from social media pages of environmental activist groups, so you know how, what, yeah, like oil spills happen, and then they have this really sad goose or pelican or something that's coated in oil, and then they wash it off, and they tell you, hey, look, we cleaned this. So seeing what actual groups are doing is something that I might show this group of high school students who are intelligent and teachable and motivated to take action to get them interested in my speech, right? And then, like, live scientific exhibits or experiments to demonstrate the effects of climate change. Having a science experiment for these science-like high school children is a way to keep them interested, right? So honestly, the answer here is use your imagination on this scenario, and you can hardly go wrong, right? And then for the third part is where you get to create something for the best 15 expression marks on this whole entire exam. This is like if you did the whole summary wrong, right? Because of the 25 marks that you had there, I think, what, 20 of them are for expression. So if you basically failed your summary, if you don't fail this, that's really good for replacing that. I can't tell you exactly what grade that will get you, but this is something to pay attention to if you know the paper 2 wasn't so hot, right? So what they want you to do is create an original response, right, based on one of the ideas that was listed on this paper. So you can use anything you want, drama, poetry, you can write a song, you can write a story, you can write an essay, and then you write that downhill. Every single time I have done this, I chose a poem because it is the shortest thing that you can do, and it also, I tend to be kind of okay at doing that, I notice, so I go with that. A lot of other people choose a poem as well. The people who don't feel creative choose a little bit of an essay or a story, because you can just write an essay expressing your views and nobody can really tell you that it's wrong, right? So they are going to be judging you for relevance and organization of ideas, effective use of language, vivid word choice, so remember your vocabulary, and then they're going to judge your personal voice or style, which I don't know how they do that, but I guess at the end of the day, it's like write something that is effective and enjoyable. So I kind of recreated the poem that I actually did for this, but it was better, honestly, the one that I wrote there. It's similar, but that one really had a touch to it, right? But before I actually read this, or while you guys are reading this, most important thing is to remember that this poem is about the idea of all of us being able to play a part in reducing the effect of climate change, right? So, and I mean, this is an English paper as well, so I went in for using rhyme, I used alliteration, and I used something else. Yeah, some kind of like wordplay in here, so it works out, right? So anybody looking at this should be able to satisfy, I'm gonna go back up, that my personal voice or style was okay, my vivid word choice, well, that might have been a little lacking, effective use of language, it's effective enough, organization of ideas is reasonably there, and relevance of content is also reasonably there. As usual, I always title stuff that I write after I write it because I don't know where I'm going either when I start. So this goes, that bottle you threw, that plastic bottle you threw, that plastic bottle you threw, if only you knew when you so casually tossed it, would travel away, and after a year and some play, be the reason a bright bird that had life lost it. if I told you today that you were to blame, I know in response you would say, who, me? But if you got down on your knees and planted some seeds as diligently as you could, you would find on display after a year and a day a charming new forest stood. And if I asked that day who's to be praised, they would say, that champion, yes, you. Right? So, again, if somebody was really going to pick this apart, and I always like to picture when the markers are doing this, I don't know what the vibe is like, but I always picture they eating like salt prunes or nuts or chow or something, and they just scroll through your paper after all of these now, and they're squinting at this with the one, does this sound like what we asked for? And two, do I like it? If they began to pick this apart, they would be able to see I used rhyme, right? So I've seen that before. They would be able to see that I matched up these ideas. Well, I can't use this highlighter at all, but I matched up, tossed it, and lost it at the end like that. So there's some structure to this. And they'd be able to say bright bird was alliteration if they saw that. And there's some irony. If you wanted to really go in and say that this getting on your knees is almost like repentance or something like that, then you could go anywhere. And honestly, why I like poetry as well, it leaves some room to say that that was, you don't know why I said that specifically, so that's how I like to do that, so I can get away with, you know, having a little more of an ease up. Okay, so I did something about that long. It didn't have more than, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, give or take, 5, 6 stanzas on the actual exam, and I passed. I'll never know which individual part of anything did that, but this worked for me, and it's worked for the last set of people and the last set of people who came before you guys, who were private candidates, so I recommend that. I will probably link these papers maybe after the stream in the comments or so, because yeah. So I saw some people saying that yes, this is in fact a simple paper. I don't think there are 45 marks that are easier to get. I wouldn't say that it's easy necessarily, but I would say that it is simple. And a lot more simple, made a lot more simple because of how much time you have to do that. Right, so this is a paper, again, I could link. The interesting thing here was this was a cartoon. I don't know if you're really supposed to go haha at this, but anytime they bring you a cartoon, humor is a device that you can imagine being there. Poetry is always easy to find repetition, metaphor, rhyme, alliteration if you can see it without going in too hard. And again, you're remembering that when you come to talking about this, what you're doing is essentially saying that all of this stuff was effective because it brings out the theme easier. And if you can say that something about it, right, so you can read that by the time, you can say that something about it was more appropriate than something else, then you're good to go. So in this case, I could have said, I believe that the article was a good medium for exploring the idea of the discrepancy in professional respect based on gender and dress style because it made use of statistics and research to prove the seriousness of the issue. But if I had chosen the cartoon, I would have switched my mind right away to be like, cartoon was good because it expresses the idea that workers may grow lax on the job if they're allowed to dress casually in a light and humorous way, which will draw the viewer's attention to a serious but possibly overlooked perspective on the matter. So yeah, that's what humor basically can do for you, and again in a poem you see that. But due to the repetitive nature of this paper, I don't really think there's too much to worry about. Right, so that's why I hadn't even planned to make this stream too long. I did a poem here again because I just 100% believe in working smart and not hard. So yeah, I had explained this in a video in more detail, this particular response, if you wanted to see that. This was the January paper, I think we went through that, right? Where we understood that they were talking about the negative impacts of information. This one was article, picture, song that we had to compare. This one was article from newspaper, song, and speech. This is the May 2021. This was an article from a newspaper. A cartoon, technically, and then a poem, right? So, honestly, your powers of analysis will be okay for this, I think, if you did English B. And even paper 1 of English A has the same type of analysis. Why did the writers say that? So that's the thing, right? This was a sample paper from the syllabus, which I think we're all familiar with. And this is an example of how the responses would fit the lines or so. Now, as you can see from those more recent papers, this is just a sample from the syllabus, as I said, but you can see how much more room they gave you to do everything and how specific they are about where they want you to write everything, right? So it's really not going to be that challenging, okay? And I don't know anyone, as I said, over the years who didn't finish this with plenty of time to spare. Normally, I would always advocate for staying until the very, very end of the exam. I know it feels good to finish before other people, but I've stayed and been like either the last or second to last person in all of those exams, and the way I figure it is you'll never have to wonder if you could have done a better job because you used everything that was allotted to you. Okay, so even though I normally say that, everybody that I know who has reported on this and everybody I've seen in real life finished with like 20-25 minutes to spare because there's not that much to do. Right, so when you go in there, just use your active underlining on everything if you can, especially stuff like this, where there's like an article or something, you want to do that. You can't really underline pictures, but still do the same thing, even if you... Was there a picture here? Yeah. Even if you make notes down here about what you're seeing, that's modern education and education from the past, more traditional methods, are balanced and equal, or whatever the thing is, because you are going to have to at least take out a main idea from there. But other than that, I don't predict you guys having any problems, and everybody has also reported that this was easier than they thought when they got in there, so I think you're good to go. Alright, so what I'm going to do is package these past papers into a folder, and I'm going to link that folder down below after I've ended the stream in a minute, and you should be able to see that. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has any other questions at the moment, but this is intended to be pretty much short and sweet to the point, right? Alright, so we don't have other questions, so I'm basically going to lock us down here, maybe by about 8:41 or 2, and give you guys the opportunity to actually go practice this or just sleep, because it's nice when this isn't actually going to be so stressful. That's pretty cool. Right, so in other news, I'm probably going to be, like, it was a pleasure to have you all this exam season. I'm probably going to be closing the channel and switching to another channel, and I'll repurpose this one for doing some other stuff. Reason being that I wanted to create higher quality content. Literally on one of these paper 3 videos I did today, somebody had commented, "Your voice is so boring," and I'm like, that's fair, everybody has an opinion. But I definitely understand what they mean because a lot of the content that I have has been from previous years and those pandemic years. Like, if I didn't have COVID voice, or my voice isn't the same since having COVID, but there's that. And Saharan dust and this and that, and in some of those things you can hear depression struggling with me. So overall, when I made this new channel, I wanted to make new content, maybe with the same papers, but just change the style. Hello. Yeah, but I didn't really get to do that this year. I somehow ended up re-uploading the same stuff from before, and then I just think it could be better if I had a little more intentionality on doing this, because again, the first channel started by an accident, this channel's been an accident, so there's that. But I will link you guys, right, the papers. Yeah, these paper threes are a little more scarce. I say scarce, they're not as easy to access, is what I mean. As the other papers. And I think it's because, well, maybe they're a little bit new. Maybe sometimes people don't care about private candidates quite as much as they should, which is a pity. But what I'm going to do is just link all of these papers that I have here, the ones with the solutions and otherwise, so that you can get them. Right. So yeah, it's due to the fact that the paper 3 is shorter, it's not as tedious as the other stuff, and it's just easier to work through on the whole. I think that's why people don't make as much of getting them and publishing them and stuff. So I haven't been able to see the 2024 January papers yet. I haven't seen the one from May, June. How do I share this? Yeah, of 2023 either. Right, done. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna paste. Bam. Right, so in that folder there you should be able to get right, so the papers that I've been working with here, and that should be a thing. Right. Oh, help with OA in grade 10. Okay. You must be past person. Hello. Alright, you're welcome for this. It really is nothing to fail. Do you need to do everything in your own words or point out stuff? The questions are pretty specific now, where mostly there will always be 3 pieces to assess. So like a text, an article from a newspaper or a cartoon or anything like that. And all of them will be surrounding a theme. So the paper is going to have a theme. Sometimes it has been climate change and what that's doing to the environment. Sometimes it's been truancy. Sometimes it's been, what are some other topics it's been? Like dress code at work. So just basic social issues. And then they ask you these really specific questions, right? So outline the main idea in each of the 3 texts is always the first question. And then they want you to zoom in on the language techniques that have been used and why they were effective. And it keeps going like that. The second question asks about if you were making a speech, how would you do it? So when you're going through the questions, just be sure to underline everything so you can see what it is they actually want you to do, right? You're not going to do well in this paper? I mean, I think you might. I mean, you know, they always say whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. So if you tell yourself you can do it, you can do it. And to be honest, when a whole 2 hours, if you're just stuck in this room, you might as well try, and you probably won't do much worse than everybody else, because when you warm up, you know, it gets easier to do. Right? I think most of the thing that challenges people is when it's a total surprise what you're actually going to be doing, but you're not going to be totally surprised because we went through it here. And with 3 questions, one of them you have free reign at the end here to write whatever you prefer about the theme. You can hardly go wrong, right? And then after that, I mean, really you can only say you did your best. So you're welcome, Cloudy. Right, you're only 11, gotcha. I was gonna say something, but I shouldn't. All right, so I think that has brought us nicely to the end of this live. I think that you guys literally have everything that you need. You can grab the papers from the drive folder that's pinned, and you have everything that you need to do this, right? So for anybody who might be watching this live again tonight, well, the VOD, we don't want to make it too long, so we're going to do that, right? Okay. So thanks for showing up, everybody. I appreciate you, and I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you next time, alright? Bye-bye. Do your best. Here we go.